silly big ash bowl.
Warning: the following is pushing the limits of the lathe and chuck used. This is for entertainment only, and should not be copied or treated as in any way sensible. Lathe is the Axminster 406, it is standing on 6 inches of solid concrete. Chuck is the Axminster SK114 with large gripper jaws.
Green, I need more Yorkshire grit. This piece of wood was donated by some friends in Brecon. It was too big for my electric chainsaw, so I had to resort to a sledgehammer and wedges, which meant my target 8 inches became 10 inches at one point, which had to be trimmed off gradually. This is the extension bed in place. I tried to initially to cut to that size, but it wouldn't fit. So we had to give up on that and trim it down a bit. So it wouldn't fit, I mean I couldn't lift it. Ignore the lip sync, the audio failed, I re-recorded this. This chunk of wood is more about testing my lathe. It's silly big, but the lathe is supposed to handle it, so let's give it a go. I'm actually putting up a link where you can buy me a cup of coffee if you want, because this piece of wood, though it was given to me free, ripped the exhaust off my van. So I'm 212 quid in for this blank, and you know, if you want to buy me a cup of coffee towards it, that'd be much appreciated, but you don't have to, just watch and enjoy. Most of it was done at a very high speed to keep the cutting down. It took about 15 hours from chainsaw to finish.
Okay, we've reached a little stage where I'm starting to think about shape now. I've had to take down thickness quite a bit in order to get my tool rest to work around the edge. Still not in balance, still working on that. But I am now getting decent shavings off. So we are starting to be able to get closer towards a decent cut. This is going to have to go on to a mortise chuck mount because I have no way of reversing this once I've finished it. So, big set of jaws, foot, which is about a third of the bowl final width. Actually a little bit under because I thought a third was just not quite right. So we've gone a bit under. My speed is now up to 120 RPM, so I'm going quite a bit faster than I was, which is allowing me to get a better cut. The shape is coming in. Obviously, off of this foot, I'm going to curve it up to the edge. I still haven't reached the outside edge yet, which is why it's not in balance. But as I get through, I'm getting more shape, more style into it. Getting to see what I'm going to be cutting. Having a better idea of how it's going to cut. And yeah, making progress.
We're actually running at about 10 times speed here. I'm still only going 120 RPM, maybe 180 by this point. But it's not going very fast. So the cuts are okay, but not great. It's the same as doing a smaller bowl, apart from the fact I'm moving the tool rest a lot more. And the tool rest, I'm going to show you at the end, but it wasn't as stable as I would have liked. I took the piece of wood off intending to film it, but I hadn't pressed record and it was too heavy to hold in one hand and reach across and press record, so you've got some stills here showing the chuck. It's the Axminster SK114 with the 85mm, I think they are, gripper jaws, using the dovetail on the outside. There's a hell of a lot of shavings came off of this. I filled up 2 garden waste bins. Hollowing, I used a bowl gouge, but I also used the Hamlet Big Brother hollowing tool. Basically, I didn't have anything quite big enough to handle this job, but we got there. Also, if you saw quickly, I did use the mini carver in certain places. That was mostly to clear edges off that, so I could get the tool rest in the position. Wasn't quite as good as I'd hoped. Floor standing tool rest would be the answer. The lathe is quite capable of turning this piece of wood. The extension bed, it's okay for platters and stuff, but it's not got enough length on it to give you the access you need. But yeah, with the floor standing tool rest, the motor and the lathe itself is perfectly stable and powerful enough to turn a large blank. As with anything, once it's in balance, it gets easier.
Well, this was more about test of the lathe, Axminster 406 or 1628, whichever you want to call it, with the extension bed on the lower setting on the legs. Motor's fine, motor turned this, no problem at all. The extension table, a little bit too short by the time you got the chuck, and this is now a 6-inch bowl. It was an 8-inch, but it wouldn't have worked at all at that. The problem is the tool post doesn't reach around the edges as well as I'd like. So what I've cut is more a forced shape rather than a desired shape, just to get the tool rest to work around it. Floor standing tool rest would have been the answer to that problem, which means that the extension table wouldn't have been needed at all. It was an exercise. It was fun to do. You will have watched the cut that massively speeded up for your benefit. It took a long time because I was only running at 60 RPM when I started. I also cut off an awful lot of thickness to make it fit the table because I couldn't take it off the lathe and redo it outside. I didn't have a saw big enough, to be honest. But yeah, it's done. Now I'm going to be silly. Well, the whole thing was silly, but now I'm going to be even sillier. I have already put sanding sealer on this. Put it on and let it dry. The other mistake I made with this is I've left it with a natural edge rather than cut it smaller. Now I know you should never let the size of the wood dictate your final finish, but this was an exercise about cutting something big. So I thought I'll go with a natural edge. That was a mistake. Didn't have enough tool room to get quite the shape I wanted. So I made compromises that left me slightly unhappy with the piece. Will I do it again? Yep. It's a silly thing to do, and I'm a silly person. I shall forget the fear and stress on this one very quickly. I think I'll do that again. Will I do it the same way? Nope. I'll do it with a floor standing tool rest. Same lathe. Happy with the lathe. I shall want some bigger gauges to do a bigger one. Again, kind of reaching the limits of the tools that I have. The tools I have are fine for the normal 10 to 16 inch bowls that I do. Not so good at 27 inch. Right, I'm going to pause the camera for a bit and let that dry in a little bit before we go any further. Right, let's put our fingers in there. I'm running at actually 108 RPM at the moment. Which isn't very fast. You don't want to go too fast when you start to take this off because you're grinding it in, breaking down the compound. A 27 inch diameter bowl, 108 RPM is quite a few miles an hour at the outside edge. Doing that. Because this is natural edge, so I'll probably use a stick to hold the cloth along the edges. Around this curve here. But you wish it was going a bit faster, don't you?
Well, that's it cut. It's pretty ugly, I think. Don't like the shape of it, don't like the colour of it. I could borrow a floor standing tool rest, apart from lockdown is in my way. But this bowl was not about finishing it to a great form, it was about testing my lathe. So I'm quite happy I managed to do that without knocking my workshop down or knocking myself unconscious or anything else. Actually, apart from the fact I couldn't stop the lathe because it took 5 minutes to stop after I hit the power switch, and I had to go and resharpen my gouge regularly by walking past a spinning piece of wood, which meant I had to keep cleaning the floor up because the shavings were becoming hazardous. But that's it, it's cut, exercise complete. I will probably have another go at a big one, but I will do it with a floor standing. And we're going to show you in a second why I was struggling. Here you can see the extension on the tool post to make it reach from the lower setting. It adds a lot of leverage to that banjo, and to get around the edge of the bowl, I was right on the edge of the casting, as you can see from this picture, which wasn't overly comfortable. There was a fair bit of vibration, especially as I got out there. It just wasn't working very well. Had I been doing a 30-inch wine tabletop, no problem. Had I been cutting a 30-inch platter, no problem. But it just wasn't up to this particular job. But I'm quite happy with the results of the experiment. I don't regret buying the extension because it's now on the other end of the lathe to make my bed longer. Keep the tool rest a bit further away from my elbow. Not the tool rest, the tailstock a bit further away from my elbow. And it can be used. It can be used on the lower setting, as I said, for thinner pieces of wood for specific projects. It will work for that. All in all, chuck, lathe, tools all perform very well, and I got a bowl which is ugly as sin and needs to be burnt really. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it.